Okay, so this last clip on problem solving for percentages, this is for those of you who want to try something a little harder, a little bit more challenging. So here's your chance. But this kind of explains the setting to you. It explains how some tougher problems can be tackled if you apply your understanding of percentages really well. So here's one. Looks like a long, big problem, but let's break it down. In a library, 20% of the books were on history. So that's all the books. It's all the books in the library, and 20%, that's this bit here, is shown, is on history. The rest were about science. So all this blue bit here, that's all science. Now, when 30% of the history books, that means we take a small section here, 30% of the history books, and 15% of the science books, that means this bit here, 15% of the science books, it means 30% of 20%, right? Because 20% is history. So 30% of 20%, and 15% of the science books means 15% of 80%. These were borrowed. Now, once these were removed, these were borrowed, then the bit that's left was 1,312 books. These are the books that are left. The little bit of gray here from history and all these blue bits of science. Those are the books that are left. Now we have to find out how many books were borrowed. Well, let's first work out in terms of percentage. What's 15% of 80%? Well, we multiply it in decimals and multiply these two in decimals, and we will get 0.12 and 0.06. Now we change that to percentage. We get 12% by multiplying by 100% and 6%. So the total percentage of books that were borrowed, both in history and in science, is 18%. 18% books were borrowed, and if 18% books were borrowed, we know that the amount of books that were left behind must be 100% minus 18%, which is 82%. So if 82% of all the books are left, it means 82% of all the books must be equal to 1,312 books. And now we can work out how much books were. You can work it out this way. 1% is how much, and 18% is how much. Or you can just work out straight away in some other way you can think of. But either way, you'll find out that this is coming to, if you work out the math, if you divide these two and multiply the answer, you'll get 288 books. That means 18% of all the books were 288 books. And that is your answer. How many books were borrowed? 288 books were borrowed. Now you can go over this video again one more time slowly to see that you understand it, and then try to do the same problem yourself without looking at the solution. Here's another one. Now this is a little tricky. I have 25% more apples than you have. So imagine you have 100%, then I have 25% more apples, which means I have, well, take 25% from here and add it to that. That means I have 125% of your apples. So this is 25%. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 this way. This bit here, this is 25%. This is all 100%. The 100 are rectangles in there. Okay, so I have 125% of your apples. Okay, and if I work out what's 80% of my 125%, which is what I sold, then 80% would be 4/5 of 125%, which is actually 100%, which means I sold actually around this much, all 100 rectangles. So if I sold all of this, I'm left with this bit here. And this must be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and times 5. This is 25% of this. So what I'm left with happens to be 25% of your apples. And since I'm left with 50 apples, then 25% of your apples must be 50 apples. Now I can work out what that is, because this is 0.25, and 0.25 times your apples is 50. So divide 50 by 0.25, and the number of apples that you have would be 200. Looks complicated, doesn't it? But go over it slowly and you'll start to get the feel of it, and see if you can do it mathematically. Okay, this is a little bit harder than the last one. Here again, I have 25% more apples than you have, just that information is different. 25% more apples than you have, of course. I have 25% more, so I'll add 25% here. And I sold 80% of my apples, means 80% of 125%. So that's sold. And we work that out. It comes to 4/5 of 125%, which is 100%, which means I sold the equivalent of this many apples. So let's see. I sold all of that. That's gone. And I'm left with 60 apples less than you. So whatever you have, if you take away 60 from that, that will be equal to this. So that's how you get it. If I sold this much, then I have 25% left. But this 25% actually happens to be your 25%, right? So it's 25% of your apples. If this is 25%, and this is the same as what was left, then this must be 75%. And this also represents 60 apples less than all your apples. So if I have left 60 apples less than all your apples, then this must represent 60 apples less, or 60 apples. So 75% of all your apples must be equal to 60 apples. That's the logic. Now, we can find out how much all your apples were if we think about 75% as 0.75. This is multiply. And of course, you know the rest. You divide 60 by 0.75. And of course, you get the answer, which is 80 apples. So you have 80 apples. And that's the answer. So that's the logic. And you can check. If I have 25% more apples than you have, I sold 80%. If you have 80 apples, that means I have 25% more apples than 80. That means I must be having 25% more than 80, which means 25 of 80 is 20. Add 20. I must have had 100 apples. So I sold 80% of my 100 apples, which means I sold 80 apples. If I sold 80 apples, I'm left with 20 apples. That is correct. So I do have 60 apples less than you have. There. Can have proved that by simple logical thinking. So try these if you can. They're a little complicated, but if you want to tangle with it, please go ahead, be my guest. Take care, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time with a new topic. Bye-bye.